He will not force the weakness to
I'm Drew Wilkins. I'm one of the founders and owners of Fish in a Bottle. We're a digital production studio based not a million miles from here, just up in Leamington Spa. And we've been going for about 14 years now, just over. We did a bit of a birthday party for ourselves yesterday. And we get to work with some really great clients on some really great projects. Just a quick sample, so we've got some stuff from the Craft Council here, we've got some Science Museum, we've got some Museum of London, the Royal Academy of Art, and the Brain Diaries right here in this building, just around the corner, which hopefully Scott's going to show everyone later. We're kind of privileged, and we've delivered literally hundreds of projects. And I'd love to stand up here and say they've all gone well. But carrying on from Andy's theme of failure, they haven't. There's lots of things that we've learned over those 14 years, things that haven't gone quite so well. Now, we're kind of guilty of beating ourselves up a little bit internally about when things go wrong, and we've always been evolving our development cycle to try and improve things and to be more efficient. But there are also things that you guys can do that will really help to make projects more efficient. And when projects are more efficient, you get more value for your budget. So we're able to deliver a lot more if things are running smoothly. And it's when things go off the rails that kind of our contingency budgets start getting used up. And if they don't get used up early on, we've got those at the end to do enhancements and polish and more of the things that you want. So I'm going to share a few things that you can help. Now, I've kind of taken it from the point of view of an external developer, because that's who we are. But I think a lot of these tips would apply to your internal teams as well. They'd thank you for it. So first up, my visuals I should apologize for. I couldn't really think of very much. So this was kind of getting involved early on, so I went for a bit of a 2001 and monolith scene. But getting your digital partners engaged as early as possible in the process gives us the opportunity to help you find more efficient ways to meet the goals that you've got. Quite often we come on when a project's already been decided. The technical approach, what you're aiming to do, is already decided. We can come on and help there. We're certainly able to deliver a build. But if we've been involved earlier on, ideally the ideas generation stage, we can offer a lot more advice on efficient ways. Basically, we know the hard ways to do things and the easy ways to do things, and we can guide you towards doing things the easiest possible way to deliver the results you need. That makes everything more efficient and saves you budget and allows us to deliver more value for money. We're also pretty geeky. So we kind of know what the new tech is and what's coming up, and we like to talk about that a lot. So we can potentially help you with things that you might not have seen yet, to guide you to the coolest new sites, the coolest new bits of interactive that you might not have seen, to guide that ideas process. So one stakeholder to rule them all. This is really important. If you kind of take one thing away from my talk, it's this. When you're setting things up internally, have one person who's responsible for collating all of the feedback that you gather, and make sure that that feedback's gathered from all of your stakeholders. So this person can kind of deal with all of the contradictions. So different stakeholders have different opinions, and ideally it all gets collated together and delivered to us in one go. So when we've delivered a build to you, it gets reviewed, all that feedback's gathered and sent to us in one lump. Because when it comes to us piecemeal, what happens is we end up reacting to the first bit of feedback that we get, and we start working on that, and we potentially change that. And then we get a contradictory bit of feedback, and it's like, well, do we go back to how it was before, or do we continue down this route? Who makes the decision? And quite often this happens, and we end up working on the things that are lower priority, rather than working through all of the feedback in the priority order. And when we've got all of the feedback together, we can work through it efficiently. So we can go, well, those two things are in the same area. We can address them at one go rather than dipping in and out. So it works much better. But I really wanted to emphasize that all stakeholders. So it's really important that you identify all of the people who are going to want to have an input into the project. We've found this kind of happen time again across all sorts of projects where, particularly when things are going well, people start showing it to other people in the organization. And then those other people have got ideas and things that they want to put into it as well. And we get feature creep. And this is particularly bad when that feature creep's coming from higher and higher up the organization. Because now you can't go, no. So I've got an example of this. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. And also, I can't quite remember which project it was, which is probably a good thing. But we were on a conference call. We delivered our beta build for the project. Everything was going fine. We'd received the feedback for that beta build, and we were talking through that in the conference call to get sign-off of that build. When on the line, there was a, hi, this is Bob. I've got some more feedback that I'd like to have happen. And I remember looking across at all of the people in the conference room, and we were all looking quizzical, and we'd all got the same question. Who's Bob? So I sat there, no idea who Bob was. And it turned out that Bob was the most senior person, and Bob was the person that was going to be signing off on the whole project. And I was we'd never heard from Bob until that point, and we never heard from Bob again. And obviously we had to now react to this feedback, and it was coming very late in the day, so we had to adjust things. And when things are that late, it has the biggest impact on the project. Things are more set in stone at that point, so it's much harder to change direction and do anything. So I really, really recommend that you work out who Bob is in your organization. When you know who Bob is, make sure Bob's involved at every stage of the review, but that feedback should go through that same process so that whoever the key stakeholder is, they're able to collate all of that feedback and channel it through so that we're getting one set of feedback and we're reacting on, Bob's stuff's probably at the top of the priority list, but it's all on the list, so we work through it in an ordered manner. So preparing content as early as possible. This is again really important. When we set up a schedule, when we work through a schedule, we've got a plan for when the content will fall in and when that content will come from you. And it's a really big challenge because if that content doesn't arrive, we have to shuffle everything around. We have to move our developers around, we have to change things. And depending on the stage of the project, that can have a large or less large impact. But regardless of how big the impact, it does mean our project managers spend time reshuffling things, and the developers that have built up momentum lose that momentum because they shift their focus. So it's really important that we get that across. And in terms of the content, from your point of view, it's really good to identify who's going to be producing that content as early as possible in the project. And we found this time and again, and we end up doing it ourselves when we're responsible for writing content. You're always too optimistic about how long it's going to take you to produce something, whether that's sourcing images, sourcing content, or writing copy for a website or a game or an application. You're always quite optimistic. So start early, because quite quickly your optimism goes. You start producing that content and you realize, oh, this is going to take me a lot longer than I thought. And the other thing I'd recommend is once you've identified who the person is producing that content, try to make sure that their time is ring-fenced, because quite often for these digital projects, it's not the main part of that person's job. They've got a day job and they have a full day anyway, and if they've suddenly got to do the content as well, again, this is where the optimism kicks in. Oh, I'll manage that in between everything else. you probably won't. Until it's too late, you start doing it, and then it's too late to deliver it, and everything starts shuffling around. So if you can think about that, you'll save yourself and the developers a lot of challenges further down the line. So this is great, because this ties into exactly what Andy was talking about before the break. Making the most of what you've got. You've probably got lots of assets around that you can reuse, audio that you can reuse, and letting your developers know what assets you've got, even if you think it's not relevant, is quite a good idea, because we can start thinking about how those assets might be used. So my examples from the Museum of London, and this is the Great Fire of London game, and up here on your right is the original, and this is the remake that we produced. So the original was built in Flash and wasn't working on anything, and was built quite a long time ago. It wasn't looking great on modern devices where everything was being displayed a lot bigger. Not this big, this is quite big. And the audio wasn't very good anymore. So actually, none of the assets that were in the original were reused. We didn't use any of the existing assets, but it still saved us loads of time, because we had the existing version to look at, to work out how it was working, and to recreate. We made quite a few changes to enhance it, so we could see the areas where it wasn't working, and we could add a bit more content to it, change a few things, and generally improve it overall. But we still saved absolutely loads of time. And the Museum of London knew that the original Flash version had been an incredibly important and popular piece of content for them. So it was tried and tested and proven content. So it was something that you could invest budget in the knowledge that the new thing that you're building is going to be really popular. So it's a really good use of what you've got existing, and thinking about, is this going to be something that we want to recreate or want to reuse or can use in different ways? Okay, moving on. So thinking about whether your project can have multiple uses. So again, the Brains diaries just around the corner. This is built as a touchscreen application, but we built it in HTML5, which means that it can now be migrated over to the website as well without doing any further development work. It works perfectly as it is, but by thinking about early on in the process, how else might we use this, you can get more value from it. And doing that didn't cost any more budget. We knew what we were going to be doing at the start. Taking the HTML5 route was no problem, and that meant that we could take it down that route. Content management systems. Do you really need to content manage it? This is something you've got to ask yourself, because we spend an awful lot of time building content management systems into the back end of all of the things that we do, only to see that thing go up live and never change. And we spent a lot of budget doing that. They're not easy necessarily to integrate or to put in. And if you don't think the content's ever going to change, take it out, because you've got more budget to spend on creating the content in the first place. And quite often you'll see basically a project goes live and then it's not your priority. You've moved on to something else, and you're probably not going to have time to do the content managing later on. And with the best will in the world, you won't get back to it. So think really hard, do I need to content manage this? Right, this is a bit contentious. We're digital, why wouldn't we build for the future? It's because no one knows what the future is, particularly in the digital world. You don't know what direction technology is going to go. And again, we spend an awful lot of time and budget trying to future-proof stuff. Like we can do that. We can't. We can make our best guess based on what's now, and based on the technology that we've got available at the moment. And you are much better focusing all of your effort onto building something really great for what's there now, and let the future worry about itself. And there's another reason for this. It's because when you've built something really great and people are engaging with it, you're much more likely in the future to have budget to update it and manage it than you would if you've spent a lot of your budget building a content management system and have got something that's not so good that people aren't engaging with. It's also worth considering that potentially, if you're only going to make minor changes in the future, you'll be much more cost effective just going back to the developers and asking them to do it than you would be having a whole content management system to make a few minor changes. So really think about, do I need to content manage this? Now, do I have another slide? No. So I was going to tell you a bit of a story here if I've got time. This is another example of not planning for the future, but it's not about the technology, it's about the content. We were working for a very large, international, globally known organisation who I can't name for legal reasons, on a very large, internationally, globally known piece of IP that you will all know really, really well, and is probably one of the biggest pieces of IP in the world. And we were working on that, and we were creating a suite of games that were going to be played to promote this brand, and as part of that project, we were also building a large back-end system that dealt with player scores, avatars, allowed experience points, customization, and had an achievement system and rewards. So we built this big system because this was part of a long-term strategy for releasing additional games and suites of games. So we built this big system and spent a lot of the budget building that. And then we built 3 small games to go on that system, and that's what we launched with. And then we got the analytics, and we got the user testing. People were going, but they're just 3 small games, they're not very good. There's this great big back-end system, and they're not engaging people for very long, they're not doing enough of a job. And the people looking at the budgets reviewed it and went, whoa, we've spent all that money on 3 small games. It's like, well, no, you didn't. You've got this great big system to support everything else. I mean, but it's not bringing in the people. Why would we spend more money on this? So that project was cancelled. That was a big failure, and something that we potentially could have helped with and could have seen coming, but we were sat there thinking, well, we've got years to build up the content in this system and make it really big, and it didn't happen. And if they'd taken the reverse approach, if they'd thought about build something great to begin with, and if it's successful, we can build all of that back-end system on the next iteration on something that we know is successful, then it would have been much better spend in terms of budget, much more efficient, and we could have spent all of that budget making 3 really great games. I've got one more point if you want it, if I've got time. A really small point, but when you're thinking about your brief, unless you know specifically what you want to achieve from a project, and you know, I want to make this, it needs to be this way, it needs to be with this tech, when you're writing your briefs, try to describe the problem you're trying to solve, not how you're going to solve it. Because when you describe how you're going to solve something, you limit the ability of the developers that you're engaging to feed into the solution and suggest ways that that solution can come about. And you end up just going down a we'll build what you asked for route rather than we'll build what you need.